Okay, so basically, I'll do a little follow up to Pulp on Pulp. Excuse me if I sound like I'm stretching, but it's because I am. Um, okay, for the longest time, the whole show versus tell thing, most of the stuff that I could find about it was about more of a screenwriting aspect of showcasing the characters' emotions through how they interact with the environment. And it's like that's not what I was interested in. I was interested in seeing what the basics is of what the heck do they mean by that? Because a lot of these darn articles could never really point out what that really was. It was more constantly like, yes, you have to show. No, you have to show how the character's feeling. His fists are clenched, and he's sweating, and you have to show every single fart that the character makes. It's like, yeah, we have to be immersed into the character's reactions. And it's just like, that's not helping me. So, with Pulp on Pulp, it did help me. Now, it's not going to help you, write because the only way you can improve your writing is to write. There's no magically delicious way to speed that along. But you can get insights to add to your bucket. And this whole filtering thing that Mr. Everybody was talking about, like, oh, God, I guess my brain's not working, but Mr. Misha was talking about kind of like with a whole room set up and you're listening and also the storyteller aspect, but the writer's also outside that aspect. It was rather interesting. It's like in a way that also showcased like kind of like a filter level that Morgan was talking about. She knows her stuff. Like finally somebody was able to just sit me down and explain some of this to me. And that's why I've been also kept looking at the old pulps, to see examples of this. It's like now that she's pointed it out, it's like, I see. So I'll try to integrate that going forward. But when I go back to look at some older stuff, because again, that's usually what slows down your momentum. Don't constantly go back to your old stuff. Like I'll sometimes go back and like, okay, this is really egregious, like flub in spelling, and I might fix that for a bit. And I usually only go back a issue or two. But if you're constantly like, oh, I gotta re-edit everything, it's like, no. See, right now, Upload Protocol is in its fourth draft stage, and that's what I'm putting up on the blog. So that way people have something to read while I'm going through and building this story. And of course, people will see improvements as I go along. But I'm not in that phase yet to where I'm going to go back and like, oh, this has to be reworked or anything with like new skills I've discovered. It's like, no. Keep going forward. That's what gets a lot of people to stop and like never even release a book. And that's also the reason why I want to go more at pulp speed. Again, it doesn't mean I don't care. It means I want to get the story finished. And all stories, even before they get into an editor's hands, it could have multiple drafts. That's just the way it works. At least to me, anyway. But yeah, this whole filtering aspect, where, yeah, felt is something I've used fairly often or see. But the way she describes it, you can still use those things, but cut down on the fat level of it. So that way the character and the reader are more on the one-in-one level where you're not experiencing things through that filter. Which, finally, somebody makes me understand it. Yes. Because I think that's really what makes me bored with a lot of woke fiction also, is because they have this big old filter level to it. And also, the characters' motivations are pretty much rom-com. You're just sitting there, it's like trying to poke them with a stick. It's like, okay, this endless eating and talking setup. It's like, how is this a plot? This isn't even slice of life. Even Azumanga Daioh had more of a plot than this. And the characters were genuinely likable. Which, Pulp on Pulp will also explain a lot of that stuff too. It's like, J.D. Cohen's part on Wonder, yes, we are fighting an uphill battle, people. There's not as many readers as there were in the 90s or even in the early 2000s. It's tapered off, and the readers that you have left will be like, yeah, what's the latest Patterson book, or somebody that somehow miraculously managed to get on the New York Times bestseller. I have a feeling more of them are like maybe even memoirs or nonfiction. But yeah, just going back to Pulp on Pulp. Yeah, it won't teach you how to write. You have to do that yourself. And it's okay to start off with the basics of see Spot run. Spot ran over to the fire hydrant. Spot jumped over the fence. You're going to start off with very basic sentences. That's okay. Even with Uplift Protocol, I started off with Eliza waking up in her bed and then racing downstairs to get ready for school. I mean, that was first draft setup, because at the time I was still trying to get some of the basics down. And did it have flashes of what current Uplift Protocol is? Yeah. And my favorite part was her helping out the astronaut on the habitat ring. But a lot of that didn't make it into the final draft because it was me learning how to put these pieces together. The biggest thing is you just need a lot of self-motivation. If you want to get this writing stuff down pat, you just gotta keep doing it. Even if it's something as simple as, I once started Punch Dinosaurs. It's like, that was an outline for the part where, the grav trains had their issue and the Cabal were attacking New Ashbury initially. I was like, I want to put these bullet points into this particular issue. That's also writing. It's like, but every little bit you do will build up your toolbox. I know I keep relating it all to running, but that's like what it is. At first, you'll be walking, and then you'll eventually gain more speed, and more speed, and more speed, until you can do a whole marathon. That's what my mom did. She trained up to be able to run marathons, and she still runs marathon length stuff on her elliptical. She can't really do as much on pounding feet on hard pavement anymore. But that's fine. She can still outrun everybody in the family. It's just a fact of life. Me and Dad only run when we really, really have to. But I also have been using that elliptical to lose 4 pant sizes. Yes, and I'm going to keep going. All it takes is a lot of perseverance too. I mean, the younger me should have followed my own advice and just start writing. Because I did a little dabbling in high school, but I should have stuck with it. I really should have. And Pulp on Pulp will help you stick with it. If you truly do enjoy something, truly love it, you'll stick with it. It's honestly, for me, it's not really a torturous process. It might seem very difficult in the beginning because you have to train yourself. You have to make something a habit, repetition. And then eventually you have to train your mind to be like, this is genuinely fun. And for me, it is. I like creating new worlds and new situations for all these characters to go through. And yeah, it is really about a mindset. I don't really adhere to the tortured artist setup. Like, oh, all my blood, sweat, and tears went into this book. It's like, no, all my fun and zaniness and genuine love of certain wheelhouses went into this book series. And that's how I'm going to always look at it. But yeah, to get a little bit more back on point, pick up Pulp on Pulp. In fact, I would recommend that if you need any kind of proper air quote motivation, these guys will help give it to you. They'll help you understand some of the basics. They might not all agree on the same things, but the principles behind their essays will really help steer your boat in a good direction. Sorry about that. I had to clear my throat. Like, bleh. In fact, I had to pause it to sneeze. Excuse me. Yeah, and you know what? Now that I think about it, even Tolkien works with a few things like this, where there's not much of a filter between the reader and the actual storyteller. Again, many thanks to Morgan Newquist for pointing all this stuff out clearly, concisely, and to where it makes sense to even my Florida brain. And I'm also going to go back and look at some more H.P. Lovecraft, because she's right. The guy gets to the point really quick, and even with the genre of horror that he works with, there isn't much of a filter between the reader and the writer, or whatever the setup is. And he doesn't go into a great amount of screenplay type, the characters grunting, or oh, you gotta know when they're gonna have a bowel movement, that sort of thing, to where it's like shit that throws me out of the story. Lovecraft cut a lot of the fat to kind of like where it's another aspect, even with the Odyssey or Edgar Allan Poe. Even looking at some of those things, the Odyssey has very straightforward setup, and it has a lot of telling, but also it draws the reader in. So yeah, in my case, I'm going to keep looking at the past to basically inform my future when it comes to my writing endeavors. Have a good day, everybody.